Welcome to the Steelers Breakdown podcast featuring Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh, who writes for PennLive. We come on the air after a late Monday night victory that had Pittsburgh feeling great. The Russell Wilson spreading the ball around to a plethora of receivers, and the defense giving up some yardage on the ground to somewhat of a no-name running back. So there are mixed feelings there, but that was dashed. All those good feelings coming out of that game and out of that weekend where we saw the Ravens lose to the Browns and the Steelers go into the bye one game up. All that comes sort of crashing down as the news breaks that Diontae Johnson is now resurfacing like a bad penny in Baltimore after Omar Khan traded him away without any alternative to the Carolina Panthers, who have basically nothing to play for. So they're dealing him out to the Ravens, and we are going to see him twice this year at least, unless we also see him in the playoffs. And we have all of those key AFC North games backloaded into the Pittsburgh schedule. So the pressure on Omar Khan to do something in the receiver room has just hit DEFCON 5. And we're going to go right to Nick for his reaction on the game and on this news about Diontae with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, a lot of good coming out of that game for the Steelers. I think offensively, John. I thought we are starting to see this offense open up more and more. They had 10 plays of 25 or more yards the past 2 weeks. I mean, that's the most I think in 5 or 6 years. I think we're talking Killer Bees era there. When the last time that happened for this team was Russell Wilson's deep ball and his ability to get the ball out to those guys like Calvin Austin and George Pickens down the field has just changed the offense. And they really worked well together. You know, the defense for the Giants stuck in too high early, trying to take away the deep balls, and the Steelers ran the ball extremely well early, forced them out of that, and then started hitting the deep balls. And so, really, really good symbiotic offense right there. And the Steelers' offense, they're figuring stuff out on the ground. It feels like they're throwing the ball deep. It looks like a legitimately solid offense. I think that's really important, and that's why I think you talked about the wide receiver trade. You saw positives yesterday out of Van Jefferson. You saw positives out of Calvin Austin the third, and that's why I think if you trade for a wide receiver too, that then bumps those guys down just one. Right, Calvin Austin becomes the three, Jefferson becomes the four. All of this works really well together, and so I think you go get someone like a Darius Slayton who you saw cook the Steelers. That would be obviously very good. I think he's a perfect fit for them. I love the fit for Darius Slayton in this offense. 6'2", runs 4'4", can get deep. He's perfect fit for what Russell Wilson wants to do. So I feel like that's a perfect fit. If the Giants are looking to trade him, I think he would be my number one option at this point. They're not going to get a superstar, right? They're not going to get a Devontae Adams or an Amari Cooper. It doesn't feel like that Cooper Cup stuff we talked about last week is going to happen after they beat the Vikings on Thursday Night Football last week. But there are names out there still. And there's not a ton of great names. Darius Slayton could be maybe there, maybe Jacoby Myers. And then you kind of start going down the list and you're talking, Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, Mike Williams. Some of those names are not super inspiring. Some of them are like, eh. But I do think acquiring someone is really important. And not just because, I think the Ravens acquiring Diontae Johnson obviously is just kind of the latest move. Look at all the top AFC teams. The Bills got Amari Cooper. Chiefs got DeAndre Hopkins. The Jets aren't a top AFC team, obviously, because they're 2-6, but they did get Devontae Adams. And now, of course, Diontae Johnson goes to the Ravens. So all of these AFC teams that you're competing with have made moves to add more firepower to their offense. So for the Steelers, I feel like you need to do that, but also because Roman Wilson hit injured reserve this weekend, right? That hamstring injury he aggravated, he's going to be out at least 4 weeks. So you're not going to have him for a while. And even when he does come back, he hasn't played much. And so you're going to wonder how much they're going to want to play him even with that. So I think there's a few reasons to do it. one, I think you're seeing other AFC teams trade for a receiver to try to bolster their offense. And then I think two, you lose Roman Wilson, who maybe could have been that internal upside option for you for a while here. So I do think, the Steelers going out and trying to get somebody to bolster this offense with what we have seen from this offense, if they can add someone else that can add another little dimension to this offense, can add some blocking, and then you could still, get in Calvin Austin III, who's had some really positive signs over the past few weeks. He's getting open on tape. He's had a few really beautiful routes. And then you see Van Jefferson starting to kind of make plays, right? But if Van Jefferson was your wide receiver 4 and was your rotational piece instead of your 2, that would make you feel a lot better. Van Jefferson's definitely an NFL wide receiver that can play as a depth receiver. He's just not a 2. And so if you get a guy that can play there and Van Jefferson can be that depth guy, I think you feel a lot better about this entire wide receiver room. George Pickens is looking like the guy you thought he would be. He looks like a true alpha dog receiver out there. And so the receiver room needs a little bolstering. But really, the offense is taking strides. It's becoming more and more positive. Now, again, it was against 2-6 teams, the Giants and the Jets. But these both statistically were decent defenses, and we'll kind of figure out where the Steelers are, over these next few games, the Commanders, the Ravens, the Browns, the Bengals. We'll figure that out in the second half, just how legitimate this 2-game sample size for this offense is. But you have to be very encouraged by what you've seen from this offense. And so going out and getting a receiver feels like the next logical step to that, and continuing this growth offensively, because you feel like there's still stuff untapped on that offense where you feel like, oh, this could even be better than what it was. And if it is, that's very positive for the Steelers. And so, you look at a guy like Slayton, you look at Myers, you call around, see if there's any, surprise candidates that maybe are going to be open. And then I think you maybe try and make that move.
Yeah, and you're so right about the chunk plays that we're getting on offense, because, the past few years have just been really, it's been a really hard watch as a fan. I mean, as a fan, you go for entertainment value. You know what I mean? First and foremost, you want to be entertained by the product that's on the field. And the offense that we had the last few years just has not been entertaining. And it is so refreshing to have those chunk play fireworks where you're just seeing the ball flying and the receiver making a clutch catch. And really, we had 2 touchdowns that were taken away. One was the penalty with the face mask, and the other, Pickens didn't get both feet down uncharacteristically. But you're also right. There's a nuclear arms race going on at the wide receiver position in the AFC. All the top teams are loading up on wide receivers. And it's an arms race, and we got to compete. And I kind of feel bad that we talk about it every week in light of, like you said, the progress that Calvin Austin III is making, and that Van Jefferson is a legit NFL wide receiver, maybe not a number 2, but these guys are working their asses off to better this team and to better themselves. And we're not dissing them. I don't want to be saying that we're dissing these guys by saying that we'd like another guy in that receiver room, because I think we got to pay some tribute with Russell Wilson distributing the ball the way he is, and hitting some of these splash plays. We are seeing these guys contribute well, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And just on Austin III, I mean, that punt return for a touchdown was one of the more electric plays. I was at the game with my wife last night, and she commented on the quarterback position that it's just so refreshing to see the offense be able to just break out of its shell, with those splash plays. But that punt return, and Danny Smith coaching the special teams has just been they've been really, really good. Your comments on those items?
Yeah, the special teams unit has been amazing. The blocks in recent weeks, and then you have that punt return. They've been great. I don't watch special teams religiously around the league, but I would imagine they have to be one of, if not the best special teams unit in the NFL so far this year. They've been awesome on everything. They've been great, obviously making kicks. Boswell's been great. How about Corliss Waitman? I want to give a shout out to the punter. How about this guy? He's been awesome. Cam Johnston went down in week 1. Remember, everybody was like, what's going to happen now? And this guy has come in and has just been so good for the Steelers. He had a few really great punts last night that I thought, he flipped the field on one where I think he had a 55-yard punt. And then he had a great one where he late in the game there on the final drive where he downed him inside the 10. Just really, really good stuff from him. And then the coverages were great. And you talk about Calvin Austin. I mean, I've watched the tape week over week over week. And I think the drop last week kind of put him in bad graces with some people where, it was one of the targets and he didn't catch it. And it was kind of an awkward position to catch the ball in. Should have been caught, but he's been open all year. I mean, like you look at the tape and he's beating guys. Like he's saucing dudes on tape. He's been open all year. And like it's finally nice to kind of start to see him actually see production from that. He is legitimately getting open. He looks like a great route runner. He looks like the guy, that you thought you were getting out of Memphis. I think that's really, really encouraging for the Steelers that they can see this from Calvin Austin and starting to realize it. And so that's really important. And I think the thing about the offense that, outside just guys like Calvin kind of getting going that I think is very encouraging is that feels like Arthur Smith as a play caller is starting to figure out his personnel a little bit. Now they're working really well with Russ, which is, they have a run game going. They're playing good defense. They're hitting the play action shots. It looks like you're watching at times, like, in terms of the offensive structure, you're watching a 2019 Seattle Seahawks offense in terms of how they attack defenses. That's what it looks like schematically. Arthur Smith's taking a lot of what Brian Schottenheimer did in the heyday of Russell Wilson. And, Russ maybe, I don't think, thought that he should be deployed like this all the time. But, now that I think, he's experienced a little bit of the rocky road in Denver, they're back to kind of what made Russ Russ. I think that this looks like an offense where Russ was at his best. I think he feels comfortable. He's operating the quick game really well. They're going into empty and shotgun when needed. He's going under center and hitting play action shots. I think that's very, very encouraging. I think Najee Harris is super encouraging. What he is doing right now, 3 straight 100-yard performances. What Najee Harris is doing on the ground is the single most impressive thing we have seen from the run game this year. He is just creating for himself. The offensive line has kind of started to figure out, the pace as well. And that's with moving parts, right? How about Ryan McCollum stepping in for Zach Frazier? Dexter Lawrence and Quinn Williams is not an easy 1-2 to face. But again, they didn't let it completely blow up their game plan, which I think is good. So I think the Steelers have positives offensively. It's a short sample size. Both of these games are. And so let's see how, sustainable it is. I don't think we want to just say just because they've been very good for 2 games that suddenly this is a great offense, but
Right.
there are definitely encouraging signs that the offense is going to go in that direction because you see directions from guys like Najee, Calvin Austin, Russ, Van Jefferson, Darnell Washington. How about that guy? Him getting involved in the passing game. That's very encouraging. So you just see a lot of encouraging signs. The offensive line is probably the biggest concern right now, right? Broderick Jones has continued to struggle. They're just young up front. In general, outside of the 2 guys on the left side, Ciamalo and Moore, who are both having very good years. McCormick is getting, his feel at right guard. And Frazier will be back for that Commanders game from what I've heard. So that'll be a nice boost. We've talked about how great Zach Frazier has been this year. And so, they're going to get healthier after the bye week too. There are going to be reinforcements coming into the Steelers' roster. Guys like Zach Frazier, Nick Herbig will be back. Cordero Patterson will be back. Corey Trice will be back. Tyler Matakevich will be back. Dylan Cook will be back. All these guys are coming back. Cam Sutton will be back, obviously. He's going to be reinstated today from the suspended list, so they'll have slot corner. There's reinforcements coming across this roster, but the offense over the last 2 games has been very encouraging, and so let's see if they can continue it, after the bye. But a lot of encouraging things for them. But because it's encouraging, you even have more. I think, when Mike Tomlin was talking about why he made the switch from Justin to Russ, it was to try and find a higher ceiling, right? It was to try and find, can you win a playoff game? And I think these last 2 weeks have shown that, okay, there's a ceiling to this offense, and maybe there's more here. And so that puts, again, as we talked about the wide receiver position, it says, okay, go and invest in this team and go find a wide receiver to boost it even more and keep up with the rest of the AFC, because you should feel like right now you're leading the AFC North. You should feel like, I don't care how hard your second half schedule is, you're the Steelers right now. You should be thinking, we're going to win the AFC North and we can win a few playoff games this year.
Out of money, I know 20 of you and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
Yeah, have a playoff game at home. Win the division, have a playoff game at home. Let me ask you, because definitely I thought they mixed Jaylen Warren. Even though Najee's doing great stuff on the ground, getting those hard yards, they're mixing Jaylen Warren in, mixing him up in the passing game a little bit, the short passing game. They like his blocking. What did you see from him? But also another guy last night that I thought was invisible. I don't know if you have a different take, but Pat Freiermuth. I mean, I was playing a guy in fantasy who had Freiermuth, and there wasn't a lot of points separating us, and I had already used everybody, so it was just Freiermuth, and he didn't do anything last night. And I wasn't going to root against them, but I kind of was happy that the Steelers won and Freiermuth did put up a goose egg.
Yeah, Muth is interesting because they definitely could utilize him more. I think in the red zone specifically. That was like the one blemish. We haven't talked about that. The one blemish from last night offensively to me, outside of Russ's fumble, was the red zone offense. It's just, right? They were 0 for 4 in the red zone. Penalties hurt them, obviously. Pickens not getting that second foot down. Two things that would have made that 2 for 4, which would have been a lot better. But you need touchdowns against good teams, right? When they face the Chiefs and they face the Ravens and they face the Eagles, they're going to want to turn that to 7. So I thought that was the one thing. And I think that's where Freiermuth can really be used more. I think Pat has done really, really good things. I think one of the more under-talked about stories this year has been his growth as a blocker. I think he's been a lot better this year than he was last year. I don't think people are giving him that credit because on Calvin's touchdown, he was out wide and got motioned in and then helped block Brian Burns and gave Russ the time to throw it to Calvin for the touchdown. So Muth definitely should be used more. I think they can do different things there to get him involved. He's clearly, especially let's say they don't love the wide receiver options and can't find someone that substantially upgrades the room. Maybe they even make a move that's minor, but he needs to be more featured. So that's part of, I think, what they need to do to get him going. But yeah, it's been interesting, but he's found his role, and good for him. He's having a good year. He definitely is. But I really like what they did against the Jets, where they featured their top 4 playmakers, which was Pickens, Freiermuth, Harris, Warren, heavily. I thought, they featured 3 of those guys pretty heavily against the Giants. Muth kind of got lost in the sauce. It was kind of Calvin's night, and that's fine every now and then. But, I think finding ways to make sure Freiermuth is involved and continuing to get him as a weapon utilized is very important, obviously, especially in the red zone. I just think they got to go to the drawing board and figure out, okay, what do we need to do in the red zone to start pounding it in for 7? Because, again, tougher tests are down the road, and they're going to need to score touchdowns instead of field goals. Boz's leg won't carry them every week.
You're right. Now, flipping the script and looking at that defense, I mean, Tyrone Tracy rolled up some yards, and he had some big runs and a bunch of plays over 10 yards for him. And apparently he wasn't really getting touched until 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage a lot of times. You know what I mean? So what's going on with that D line? And also, I heard a little criticism. Now he had a nice hit in last night's game, but in terms of Minkah Fitzpatrick not coming up with the splash plays that we expect, the turnovers. He's kind of in a dry spell there. At the back end of that D. What do you think? And especially with Derrick Henry twice on our schedule in the back end, with that run defense, there was a little bit of a fall off last night for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Steelers' defense, I think, should be better down to down. Now, listen, the statistical outputs in terms of points have not been there for most teams, right? The most they have let up all season is 27 to the Colts, but they've allowed some bad conversions on third longs. We saw this in this game too. We saw them allow 15 points to the Jets in the first half. It was a rough first half against the Jets, right? Missed tackles. The Colts really got after them. Dallas had over 400 yards of offense pretty easily against them, but Dak threw 3 picks. I think, some of what they're doing right now is living off talent. I think they're a very talented defense, very obviously, at all 3 levels. This is a very talented group. You have stars at every level. And so they create turnovers. They create splash plays. Even if it's not Minkah, it's Diontae Jackson, it's Beanie Bishop, it's Joey Porter Jr., it's Deshaun Elliott. And so, I think they are sustaining themselves a lot off of turnovers, which I think is good because obviously you want turnovers, but it also can't be the only way. You got to force punts and you got to be better down to down. I just think the down to down consistency for the Steelers is not completely there. And part of it is, I think, little details, not getting enough depth in this coverage underneath to open up a bigger hole, or some guy, goes out of his gap and plays hero ball and allows Tracy to bounce it. There are some things that happen there. I also don't think they're super great schematically. We've talked about this before. I think they're just very predictable. They don't blitz a lot. They rush 4. They play cover 3 and cover 1 so much. And so basically what I'm trying to say is, where the bones are buried in this offense. This defense, if you are the offense. Because if you're going to run cover 3 and cover 1 and single high all game, you can scheme up things that get the ball out quickly against those coverages and neutralize the passers, right? And more importantly, they don't really move TJ and Alex around. Now, they did yesterday. That was an encouraging sign to me. They started to move TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith around the line of scrimmage. Highsmith had a sack from the opposite side that he usually does. I think they need to continue to do that, no matter really how comfortable both those guys are. I think they're definitely best on the sides they play on usually, but I also think, you have to kind of make it easier on them. And what I mean by that is, how can you consistently scheme up unblocked pressures? It doesn't just need to be for, Highsmith and Watt, but those two specifically certainly is very important, I think. And so the Steelers definitely need to make sure that their blitzes come down. They're going to need blitzing and unpredictability up front in the second half of the schedule. They're going to need to have more blitzes. They're just going to need to be more unpredictable. They're going to have to disguise coverages more. They're going to have to do different things across the defense, I think, to try and frustrate quarterbacks. I just think it's a little too easy to know what's happening pre-snap right now. So I think some of it is details among the players. I think other parts of it is the coaching is a little too predictable. And so, that's what I would say. Their run defense yesterday was definitely more player related, though. They had guys that were out of gaps. Keanu Benton really had a rough game. I thought that was they kind of ran right at Benton a lot, and I'm starting to question if Keanu Benton's a nose tackle. I'm not sure he is. They're playing him as a nose, but I think he might be more of a traditional 3-tech. I think he could be, Ogunjobi's replacement if Ogunjobi is gone after this year, which kind of expect to happen. I think he could slot in there. I think he's more comfortable at that 3-tech rather than playing tilt where he has to 2-gap. I don't think that's really his lane, and you saw them go after him. I mean, you want to talk about yards before contact. You talked about it, 3 yards downfield. The Steelers had the 3rd worst yards before contact this week. They allowed, 3.41 yards before contact this week. Tracy wasn't even getting touched before he was downfield. So that is by far the highest the Steelers have had all year. They have had a really good run defense for the most part all season. And I thought, some of the linebacker play at times was a little bit out of whack too. But we'll see if that's a significant thing for the Steelers moving forward. I'm not necessarily sure that it will be because they have been a top 5 run defense and they've gone up against very good run offenses. Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, and they have slowed them down. So we'll kind of see where all of that goes. But I would say the Steelers defense just needs to get better schematically, and they need to hone in on the little details there to be better down to down. They're a good defense because they're very talented and they have superstars at all levels. But I think they could be better. They should be a top 5 unit, not just a top 12 unit.
Right. Now the rhythm of this week, because it's a bye and because there's something really big happening next Tuesday. No, I'm not talking about the election. That is the deadline for the NFL trading period, and that is when Omar Khan's either going to make it rain, or we're going to see the fevered hopes of Steelers Nation be washed away if he doesn't land that receiver that, at least like you said, sort of increases the chemistry that's there in that room, just takes it up a notch, because we're definitely not criticizing Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin III, who are really flashing, some nice work on the field, working with Russell Wilson. So walk us through what happens on a bye week, and how this whole trade thing could shake out over this next 7 days.
Yeah, they'll have a practice tomorrow, just kind of a focus on details practice. They'll also have an extra practice next week on Monday. So 2 extra practices where generally it's just Steelers focusing on Steelers. Now the Steelers this week are going to have 1 less practice. Usually there's 2 practices before the bye. They send them out. But obviously because they played on Monday, there's only going to be 1 this year. So you kind of have mid-season meetings with the guys, talk about them, what you want them to improve upon, et cetera, et cetera. And then most of the guys go, back home or whatever. They'll, I know some guys are going back to their high school, going to their colleges, going to see their family, wherever it is. They are usually going to see their family and taking it easy this week. And they're not, trying to do too much. So that's generally what happens. But from a coaching staff perspective, the coaches do not, the coaches do take off and try to unwind, but this is about self-scouting. If you're Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, Arthur Smith, it's trying to kind of go through your scheme, go through what you have, and say, where can we improve? So when we talked about the defense being predictable in their coverages and different things like that, if Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin are going to look and say, oh, we run – now this is just an example. This is not a stat. We run cover 3 a ton on second down between – when 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 6 and teams are really attacking us and these stats show this, we need to change that. That's what I talk about when self-scouting. Or if you're Arthur Smith and you say, oh, we run way too much wide zone on first down and teams are playing to that. You do self-scouting every week, but you can do a much deeper self-scouting process throughout the bye week. You can really delve into the numbers and change what you're doing. And so the Steelers did this last year when they completely shifted the run scheme, right? They came in with an inside zone duo, split zone run scheme last year. And even when Matt Canada was on the staff before he was fired, they started to shift over into this more heavy gap stuff, where they started to pull guys more. That's just an example of what a bye week can buy you. You can change things like that during a bye week. Because they looked at the Rams when they faced the Rams last year, really liked what the Rams did on the ground and basically stole what the Rams did. I mean, so, you can look at, an opponent you have, or you can look around the league. I think that's another thing. You can look at global trends around the league. So Mike Tomlin can go and watch Kyle Shanahan film this week, and they can implement new things into the offense. Or he can go watch Brian Flores tape, who has been very good in Minnesota with his blitzes, and the Steelers might want to get their blitzes up, and they can start to implement some of those things. So this is part of what it is for coaches. So it's a deep self-scout. It's implementing new things, a direction you want to go, fixing weaknesses. And then if you're a general manager, you look at your roster as a whole. You take a holistic approach to this and say, okay, where can we improve? And what do we want to do? What do we want to get out of this year? For the Steelers, it's obviously going to be we want to win a playoff game. And so you're going to highlight your weaknesses and you're going to say, okay, where can we improve this? So, if they're wide receiver, okay, make calls around the league and say, okay, this is what we want, who we want, what we're willing to give up, et cetera, et cetera. You look at the progress of your rookies, or for example, maybe they don't like what Broderick Jones is doing at tackle, so maybe they try and call about a tackle. We're just talking about things there when you're evaluating it, but that's kind of what you're talking about when you're self-scouting like that schematically. And then Tomlin can also go to Khan and say, after that, he's like, maybe I don't have the personnel to do this, but this is kind of what I want in this receiver because I want to start doing this in the second half or whatever. So it all kind of melds together like that. But for the coaching staff, it's heavily self-scouting and it's heavily deciding the directions and improvements you want to make and how you want to implement said improvements coming out of your bye week, like the Steelers did offensively last year, and they were one of the worst rushing offenses in football through their bye week last year, and then after their bye week, they became, I believe, a top 6 rushing offense. So you can see how the splits change things significantly, and so we could easily see the Steelers, who I think out of this week are 31st in blitz rate in the NFL. We could see if they come out of the bye week blitzing the heck out of Jaden Daniels. They could definitely be a top 10 blitz team. I mean, we have seen that. That is not a foreign thing out of bye weeks. That is crazy to think. You can change your identities and implement different schematic ideas from around the NFL on a deeper level throughout the bye week. So just something to think about for the Steelers. But I'm sure they're going to be looking at their tendencies and self-scouting and trying to decide, okay, this is what we want to do. This is where we want to improve, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting. Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit of a touchy subject for some Steelers Nation fans, Brian Flores. There's a lot of guys in Pittsburgh who thought he should have never left and still should be coaching the defense in some capacity. They hated to see him go. And you're right. He definitely has the Vikings playing some good D. But yeah, I think this bye week is coming at a great time. It's going to be a perfect Act 1 was the opening. And now we're going into Act 2. And it's going to be interesting. And really the drama is even going to be more because they're going to do the hard knocks focusing on the AFC North. And I swear that's why they backloaded all those games that the Steelers play in the AFC North to the last half of the season. And certainly in December, there's going to be some monumentally consequential games being played by the Steelers. And obviously the next 7 days will be consequential for any trades. So tune back in next Tuesday. That's a big day, everybody. Next Tuesday, November 5th, for a lot of reasons. Tune back in, and we'll see how everything shakes out with the breaking news on the trades, and then set up for your second half of the Steelers season, opening in Washington versus the Commanders. Until then, go Steelers, everybody.